You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, late last night, there was a wave of pardons that Donald Trump signed off on, including those for Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Mark Meadows, Sidney Powell, Kenneth Chesebro, Kelly Ward, Jenna Ellis, Christina Bobb, all of these people who were involved in the effort to subvert the 2020 election. So a lot to talk about here, but first and foremost, do federal prosecutions preclude the ability of the states to continue prosecuting these people?
No, federal pardons, a presidential pardon, have absolutely no impact on ongoing, current, or future state prosecution. So first and foremost, as an old career prosecutor, I hope this only inspires state law enforcement officials, state attorneys general, state prosecutors, district attorneys to not only continue their efforts to hold these folk accountable, the ones who are either being investigated or who are already charged in state court, like in Georgia and in Arizona. I hope those prosecutions, continue to move forward apace because these presidential pardons have no impact. But Brian, for gosh sakes, lawlessness is now the norm in a Trump administration, or if you're in Trump's orbit and you are somebody who tried to help him steal the presidency in 2020. If you helped him in committing crimes designed to run roughshod over the expressed will of the American voters, even if you are a co-conspirator of his in a federal indictment, guess what? Donald Trump has your back with a presidential pardon. So let's take on some of those names you just listed. Remember when Donald Trump was criminally indicted in Washington, D.C., in federal court for multiple felony offenses for trying to unlawfully overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election? I sure remember it because I was sitting in court the very day Donald Trump appeared on that indictment and was arraigned on the charges. Of course, it went away, courtesy of both the Supreme Court bestowing upon him absolute immunity and him winning re-election and essentially killing all cases and investigations into him. That's corruption and abuse of power writ large. But in that federal felony indictment against Donald Trump, there were 6 co-conspirators. Now, they were unnamed and unindicted, but let me first say, when you see an unindicted co-conspirator in a federal indictment, you are very likely to see a subsequent federal indictment against those co-conspirators. Of course, Jack Smith's case couldn't progress to that point, courtesy of Donald Trump killing those cases. But there was wide reporting about who the 6 unindicted co-conspirators are who helped Donald Trump try to overturn the results of the presidential election. Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, John Eastman, Jeffrey Clark, Kenneth Chesebro, and there was informed speculation across multiple media platforms that Boris Epshteyn was the 6th unindicted co-conspirator. And those are 6 co-conspirators that Donald Trump just pardoned. For gosh sakes, Brian, even Bill Barr, back when he was Attorney General, testified before Congress that a president can't possibly grant a pardon to a partner in crime, a co-conspirator, somebody who could provide incriminating information against the president, because that would clearly be improper, unlawful. Well, maybe this will even cause Bill Barr to raise an eyebrow. But, apparently when you're Donald Trump and you're looking to do favors for folks who helped you try to unlawfully retain the power of the presidency, you got a pardon coming your way. And he started with what I've always called the boots of the insurrection, the people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th, but now he has pardoned the suits of the insurrection, among them the lawyers.
So I want to talk about that. What are the consequences of Trump basically broadcasting to folks that, okay, you've got the insurrectionists, you've got the attorneys who made this thing possible, all of them got carte blanche, all of them were given a get out of jail free card. What is the practical consequence of that as we move forward into 26?
Brian, this is a recruiting call. Donald Trump, in effect, just he just posted a job announcement calling all insurrectionists. You know, if you're looking for a job where you can commit crimes to try to help your favorite president retain the power of the presidency, or if the elections happen to be midterm elections, you can commit crimes to help Republicans win re-election, even if it means, you know, acting contrary to the voters, the American voters. You can apply for this job. You can participate in Donald Trump's criminal scheme, his criminal conspiracy, and part of the benefits that come with this job is you will have a presidential pardon coming your way for all of the crimes that you may have committed as part of Donald Trump's criminal conspiracy. This is a recruiting call. This is what it is. And, you know, there are people who he pardoned in this latest batch of 77 pardons who pleaded guilty to being part of Donald Trump's criminal efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election, like Jenna Ellis and Kenneth Chesebro. Those two Trump-affiliated lawyers pleaded guilty to state charges that they committed crimes to try to help Donald Trump, you know, unlawfully retain the power of the presidency. And now they're going to enjoy a federal pardon. It doesn't wipe out their state criminal convictions, but it does help guarantee that moving forward, they can commit whatever federal crimes they want to kind of help Donald Trump and the Republicans retain power. And they have already been pardoned for past crimes. And Brian, do we think there's a chance in hell that if they continue to assist Donald Trump as a co-conspirator, whether indicted or unindicted, they're not going to have another pardon coming for those crimes at the end of Trump's term? This is the federal government being run as a criminal organization.
So honestly, what's to stop other attorneys, other insurrectionists from reading the writing on the wall, seeing the extent to which election subversion efforts are fully legal, fully protected at the hands of this president, and signing up to be the next person in the next batch who does the exact same thing?
Not only is there nothing to stop them, to discourage them from doing that, this act is an act of encouragement. You know, it really is a recruiting call, calling all insurrectionists. You know, part of the job description for these, you know, insurrectionists are, if push comes to shove, and I mean that literally, you may have to go to the Capitol and beat the hell out of police officers in order to stop the certification of a president. And, you know, if you're a lawyer and you're inclined to assist me in my criminal endeavor, like Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, and Jeffrey Clark, and Kenneth Chesebro did, well, you're still going to have a get-out-of-jail-free card because I will pardon you. I've already pardoned you for past crimes. That is the opposite of deterring criminal conduct. It is encouraging and rewarding criminal conduct. You know, where we are right now is a place that, you know, our founding fathers could never envision, where a president is not only able to steal the powers of other branches of government, the legislative branch, for example, but he can rule over his American kingdom with impunity and immunity against crime himself, and because of his, you know, core constitutional powers that the Supreme Court in the presidential immunity case announced are untouchable, he can now pardon all of his criminal co-conspirators who assist him in the endeavor to retain power and to perhaps assist other Republicans to come into power, members of Congress, without having won their elections. I mean, this is sort of the potential end of American democracy coming into full focus, given that there doesn't seem to be any one or any organization or any state that is, you know, willing and able to step up and fully resist and put a stop to Donald Trump's, you know, unchecked, rampant, runaway lawlessness.
To that end, then, what obligation do the states have, recognizing that this is basically just legalized at the federal level, that Trump will always swoop in and give somebody a pardon if they illegally try to help him subvert any election? What obligation do the states have? What would you like to see governors, attorneys general do right now in light of the fact that Trump is giving a green light to these people to be recruited and to help him do whatever, carry out whatever plans he has to carry out?
Well, I would like to see the state court prosecutions continue to move forward. There is still one that's up and running in Arizona. There was one in Wisconsin, but I think that suffered some real setbacks, and we may not see those charges actually move forward. This is for fake elector schemes, among other things. There was one in Georgia, which has sort of, meandered through the appellate courts in Georgia, and it looks like it is at a dead stop. It may still be on life support, but I don't know if that RICO case down in Georgia that was brought against, among others, Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump, Jenna Ellis, Kenneth Chesebro, and others. I don't know if that one is going to continue to sort of be viable moving forward. I hope it is. I believe there may have been one in Michigan, if I'm not misrecalling. But, to the extent there are any state election laws that were violated by Donald Trump and his entire criminal cabal in 2020, I would certainly like to see those criminal cases brought, because, as we've already discussed, a presidential pardon cannot put a stop to, cannot erase, and cannot excuse somebody for violating state laws. So I just think the ante continues to be raised by what Donald Trump is doing as it relates to the need of the states to step up, to go as hard as they can, as long as they're abiding by the facts, the law, and the Constitution, to hold accountable the folk that Donald Trump is trying to keep from being held accountable.
Glenn, finally, let's finish off with this. Does a broader conversation need to be had about potential limits to the presidential pardon power? Because it's one thing if you're pardoning or commuting the sentence of somebody who was given an undue sentence for a smaller infraction, a drug crime, whatever it may be, and that's generally what we've seen from presidents before. But if a president is basically recruiting people to serve as co-conspirators or accomplices for crimes that he himself is committing, that's an entirely different ballpark than what we've seen in the past.
And there are two things that are conjured up by that question. I'm glad you asked it. First of all, the answer is yes. No. The answer is hell yes. We need to revisit trying to put some kind of constraints, legislative constraints, on the president's exercise of the pardon power. Now, let me hasten to add, Brian, that where will those legislative restraints end up? The Supreme Court. And will the Supreme Court say, look, we told you once and we're willing to tell you again, you can't restrain a presidential pardon power, including if a president wants to recruit co-conspirators to commit crimes to help him retain power unlawfully and unconstitutionally, and whom he then pardons for being part of the criminal conspiracy that he recruited them to be part of. If that is really the vision that the Supreme Court has of what the Constitution provides, the Constitution, Brian, provides that a president of the United States shall take care to faithfully execute the laws of the nation. I think an unconstrained, runaway, corrupt pardon power that is beyond the reach of the legislative branch or the judiciary, the courts, and the prosecutors for that matter, is kind of the exact opposite of what the founders envisioned for our Constitution. So the answer is yes. Just because we think it would be an extraordinarily difficult uphill climb to legislate any kind of restraint over the pardon power, it needs to be done anyway. But here's the other thing that must be done by the incoming administration in 2028, which will be a Democratic administration if past is prologue, because Donald Trump, the voters just sent him a message loud and clear. You are out of control. We're sick of your shit. And look at what they just did in the off-year elections. And I expect we'll see more of that. I hope we'll see more of that in the midterms. Here's what must be done. The way Donald Trump just wielded the pardon power to get rid of his own criminal co-conspirators by virtue of that federal indictment with those unindicted co-conspirators. That must be attacked not just by the legislature, but by the executive branch itself. The Department of Justice needs to bring test cases against this gross abuse of presidential power. And for gosh sakes, they'll have Bill Barr's own words under oath to Congress to help back them up. Not that, those words plus $4 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks, but still, even Bill Barr said a president can't do this. So they have to be attacked in the courts. If we lose, we lose. But just as I told all of my federal homicide prosecutors when I was the chief of homicide at the D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, there is no shame in bringing a righteous case and losing it. There is nothing but shame in refusing to bring a righteous case for fear of losing it. We have to attack in both the legislative branch and in the courts Donald Trump's gross abuse of the pardon power.